The things I do aren't all about memory, so stick around if you want to know some of the ultimate student success secrets that go beyond memory. For one thing, the reason why I'm doing this actually is because in Vienna, I wasn't able to get through the entire conclusion of the 8 hour Memory Secrets of an A plus student presentation because there's just too much stuff in this final lecture. So I wanted to offer all of you the full presentation. And yeah, so it's the conclusion to the presentation about using memory techniques as I teach in the magnetic memory method to become an A plus student. And the conclusion, really, to the whole memory palace thing is to build memory palaces, fill them with information, rehearse that information like you would practice a musical instrument, i.e., having sort of dedicated practice. And dedicated practice, just very quickly, is a specific kind of practice. It's the kind of practice that you do when you break things into parts and you rehearse just tiny things, parts and elements of the entire piece before that you try to perform the entire piece. And so you can do that when you're using memory techniques. You don't have to go from the beginning of a memory palace all the way to the end. You can just be selective in the parts that you choose. And the final sort of conclusion to the whole memory palace part of the memory secrets of an A plus student is to succeed and prosper, because when you do have those techniques, that's what you're going to be able to do. So what else is there? Well, there are a lot more student success tips, and that's what we're going to get into right now. Make sure, for one thing, that you're pursuing your true passions and you're not imprisoned by fears of the future. And what this means, essentially, and why I'm using the word slave's luck here, is that all too many people go to university for the wrong reasons. They go there because they really are convinced that they're going to get a job at the end, or the job that they want, when really, most of us, when we go to university, are not at the right age to even have a clue of what it is that we want to do. And so when we're successful following our degrees, that's really called slave's luck, assuming that we get into a position that we don't actually want. So instead of spending 8 years as a medical student only to learn that you really don't enjoy medicine, you don't like having your hands all over strangers' bodies, or in case of a dentist, your hands in strangers' mouths, that's called slave's luck, because now you're successful, now you've got mortgages, now you've got cars, now you've got all kinds of things to pay for, and where else are you going to go? You've specialized. So as you are going through university, you may be so young that you can't project what you will love or not love 10 years from the future, but I'll bet that you certainly can tell right now what you're truly passionate about. And if you're leaving that aside while that you're studying for some future goal and you're not convinced, something deep inside of you is saying that this is all wrong, then get out of there. That would really be the major student success secret that I could have. Of course, I have to tell you that I was totally convinced by what I was doing, so I'm not one to speak, but I've seen it many, many times around me that people are there for the wrong reasons, and this is imprisoning because they're not even enjoying the university process. And that's what university is really all about, is enjoying what you're doing and growing as an individual, becoming a better citizen, which arguably you can only become a better citizen if that you are enjoying what you're doing. So that is a major, major student success secret that I think will change anybody's life if they're pursuing something that really is not in line with their destiny, with their being. And I think everybody has a sense of what that destiny and being is. Now, the next thing is the 80-20 principle, and you've probably heard about this. You've probably heard it so many times, it's been bounced over everybody's head like a hammer. It's also called the Pareto principle, or the Pareto principle, however you want to pronounce it. And the idea is that 80% of the results come from 20% of the time that you spend. And that's really great. What you could do essentially is track your time by writing down the beginning of a task, what time it is at the beginning of a task, and what time it is at the end of a task, and trying to figure out what percentage of your success is coming from what time spent, and then maximizing that time spent so that your expenditure of energy is creating more and more success, and you're balancing this out so that you're not wasting time on a lot of activities that contribute very little or nothing to your success. But what I think is very important about this principle is to also turn it on its head, because we don't rest enough, we don't play enough, and when we do rest and play, we're usually plagued by guilt by what we should be doing. And so we need to think about the 80-20 principle in terms of enjoyment of life. So what are you doing when you're resting or playing or out on the town, and what's going on in your mind? Are you really getting 80% of pleasure out of the fun that you're doing? Can you maximize it to 100% of the pleasure? I really always liked the line from Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now, where he says, so many of us, we're procrastinating, we're doing nothing, and we're not even enjoying it. So we need to actually try to enjoy our procrastination. And it is the guy, his name, he wrote Tim Ferriss. See, the memory king. Tim Ferriss wrote The 4 Hour Workweek, and in some part of his writing, he points out that we should actually plan in our procrastination. And in order to do that, we really can just schedule when we're going to do nothing and make that a very important part of our life. So the 80-20 principle, really, really interesting. Go look it up, but flip it around. Also think about how it applies to your free time and making sure that your free time really is free and isn't plagued with guilt about what you could be or should be or would be doing otherwise if you were more dedicated to whatever you were doing and on the path of passion, as I was talking about in the last point. Now, there's also the point of measuring where you are today so that you can compare with where you want to be, and then you can create a plan for getting there. And you'll hear that a lot, and I think it's a really, really great success secret. And there's just an amazing thing that happens when you measure where you are. And actually, I would recommend that you do that every day. It sounds pretty intense, but if you spend every day writing down where you want to be a year from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, if you should be so lucky, then you're going to find very quickly that you have to be honest with yourself about what you really want, because if you write down your goals every single day, it's going to get so deadly boring that you won't want to do it. Or if you force yourself to do it and it's boring, you're going to see that that is really not the goal that you want for yourself anyway. So you'll also find different ways to plan, because as you lock in on what you really want, you're going to really have new ideas for planning, and it's going to become much more clearer to you. And in fact, if what happens to you is similar to what happened to me, you find out that what you actually really want is almost always already there. And that's a really neat thing to experience. Now, in terms of this caveat that I'm mentioning here, you want to plan and you want to have a goal that you're moving towards and have that plan engaged with it, locked into it. But you also want to be able to adjust the plan so that you can really incorporate emergencies and strange things that happen out of the blue, and also just things that happen where your personality just simply changes and you don't want certain things anymore. So you do this by analyzing your results as you go along, and that's another reason why to write down your goals every day, because you're essentially analyzing your goals in the context of what's happening in the here and now. So part of this is actually having role models, and we always hear about having role models, and it's really, really super important. I have role models, and I have a diversity of role models, and they're really, really important. However, a lot of people copy the strategies of role models rather than the mindset. So, for instance, you might be following, I don't know, if you're a film screenwriting guy, like I like to sometimes play in the world of screenwriting, and if I were to follow, say, Quentin Tarantino's strategies for getting into the film market, this would be really the wrong way to go about things, because that's what worked for him, and that's what worked at a historical period in which it was possible to get a foot in the door in that time. And it just doesn't work that way anymore. And even if it did work that way, he is different than I am, and he's different than you are if you have aspirations to go into screenwriting and directing films. So you want the mindset more than the actual strategies themselves when you are imitating or modeling role models. You really, really want to make sure that you are in sync with the actual thinking that got success more than the actual strategies, because when you're able to think your way into the strategies, then from your own personal energy, your own personal motivations, then the strategies are going to come. They're going to reveal themselves, and that's just a magical sort of thing. Actually, there's nothing magical about it, but it does feel magical when it happens. So model mindsets more than strategies. Now, there's also something called the 50-20 principle, 50-20 minute principle, the 30-10 minute principle, the 60, 30-minute principle, however you want to make this arrangement. The idea being is that you work for a set period of time and then you take a break for a set period of time and you cycle that throughout the day. And I learned this from a guy named Dean Jackson, and he did something called the 50-minute focus finder, and you should look that video up on Vimeo. I don't think it's on YouTube, but it's on Vimeo, and it's an amazing hour. It's probably the best hour that you will ever spend learning his techniques, and they're just really, really great. But one of the major things that he talks about, amongst other things like using envelopes and clearing your brain for activities, and just amazing video. You got to see it. He talks about this sort of patterned work rest schedule, and it's really, really powerful. And everybody has an iPhone or some kind of smartphone or some kind of clock on their computer. We can all do this. We can all set a buzzer. I use focusatwill.com, which I also learned about from Dean Jackson, and he was talking about it on this video, I think. And he basically, so focusatwill.com is for people like anybody, but people like myself who are so scatterbrained. You go and you listen to music, and it has some gobbledygooky scientific stuff that may or may not be true. I haven't looked into the research about how it syncs with your brain patterns and it follows your productivity, and it gives you little quizzes at the end and so forth. I don't know, but I really like the classical music channel. It's classical music that seems very cleverly selected so that it flows with your thought processes rather than interrupting them, and that's really, really cool. And you can set a timer so that it stops playing music at a set period of time, like for instance 50 minutes, and then you go and take a break for 20 minutes. In that break, push-ups are really great. I like to do push-ups, and also getting something to eat. Eating every 2 hours is my thing, maybe not yours, but that's really great as well. And of course drinking water. But 50-20 minute principle. Oh yeah, so Dean Jackson's 50-minute focus finder. You really want to check out that video. It's really great time spent if you're a student or anybody who is working sort of as an entrepreneur or so forth, because students really are entrepreneurs, if I can slip that point in. We, especially in university, we are investing in a future outcome that is going to pay off eventually, or so that we hope, and we can really treat our university endeavors like an investment, like a job as an entrepreneur, that we're investing time, money, and energy into an outcome which is an income later that we want to be able to achieve. So he's got lots of productivity tips that apply in that area as well, especially the 3 envelope thing that he talks about. Now, I also want to recommend that you learn how to sell yourself. And so every essay you write in university, or indeed in high school, you're essentially trying to sell your argument, and you're trying to sell your evidence. Usually they say that your evidence is supposed to support your argument, but I don't think so. I think that you're actually trying to sell both the argument and the evidence. You're trying to get them to literally buy it, and the price that they are paying is the grade. And so you really want to convince people. You want to learn persuasion, but you want to do it ethically, and you want to do it honestly, and you want to only persuade based on things that you actually feel are supported by evidence and so forth, but you still want to sell it, and you want to sell yourself. It's not ever really good enough to sell other people's ideas. You want to sell your conviction in those ideas. So when you're writing essays and you're just doing it to get it done, and you're just doing what the teacher told you, not good enough. That's not selling yourself. You want to really integrally integrate yourself with the material. So if you have to write an essay on Kafka, love Kafka. And if not, go to the professor and say, I cannot stand Kafka, but I'm really interested in Brecht. And could I please write an alternative essay for Brecht? And believe me, I used to do this stuff all the time, and it was really, really great. Professors do not mind. And if they do, then try to find your way through it somehow and get your passion involved so that you are wiggling towards selling yourself, essentially, putting yourself into it. But again, always having a really good argument, having really great evidence that supports the argument in a way that actually is supportable, not just bending evidence from your research that gets sort of the idea across in a way that you want, but putting your passion into it, because you are selling yourself for that grade, and so you should make it a grand presentation. And so I would also add, never submit an essay that you couldn't either include in a portfolio of your writing or actually get published. And You may think, well, I'm not really a good writer and all that sort of stuff. It's nonsense. We're all good writers. Anybody who can type is a good writer, and anybody who can type can publish something. You can get your own blog, you can build a portfolio of your writing on a blog. All wealth comes from writing, and that's another quote from Dean Jackson. Now, when you're doing your essays, you want to decide whether you want to focus on sort of one thing, or not just your essays, but when you're focusing on your career, whether you want to focus on one thing and reach sort of expert level or help facilitate the success of others. So that's really two kinds of streams. So when you're studying in university, you can think about that. Do you want to become an expert who has deep and intense knowledge and also ability in that knowledge area at some level? Or do you want to be someone who facilitates the success of others, which requires a level of expertise, but it's a different kind of expertise. It's the expertise of support, it's the expertise of implementation, it's the exercise or the expertise of being able to make things happen so that another person on a, so to speak, higher level is able to be a person who has really great ideas, or they're somehow the person who has the visionary. That's the word I'm looking for. You want to be able to either be the visionary or the person who helps the visionary create the vision and have the vision come through. So that's a very important thing as you're going along. And you want to read widely, read vertically, use what I call bibliomancy. Bibliomancy is a really interesting technique. I called it that because of the magic that happens when I did this certain practice, which is, say I'm researching Kafka again, or maybe Brecht, or whatever it may be in university, and I go to the shelf and I find one book on Kafka, and instead of just taking that one book, I look at all the books around on the different parts of the shelf, and I start packing up my arms with all kinds of books so that we can actually have an amazing amount of text that we get into our brain. And I have a podcast on magneticmemorymethod.com if you haven't had a chance to look at it, called How to Memorize a Textbook, and you'll see more of this sort of bibliomancy, but bibliomancy in a way that gets the material into your head for long-term use and being able to recall it at ease by reading strategically. But just read everything that you can and read more. If you are given an assignment to read one book, read 3. If you're given an assignment to read 5 books, read 10. And you will constantly amaze yourself by what you can put into your head and the value you can create for others by becoming a conduit of more knowledge than is expected of you. Now, when it comes to writing, we're already talking about writing, but let's go back to writing. Don't just write essays for university. This is really a way of stultifying yourself and not becoming diversified in your writing. So you want to practice journalism, the school newspaper perhaps, or just a real newspaper, anything that you can get something into, the local newspaper. Sometimes at these restaurants they have little newsletters or whatever that come out every morning and have local news and so forth. You could write for that. Anything to diversify your writing skills. Blogging, of course, is still very popular and an important part of internet society. Then you can write stories, actual fiction. I really, really recommend trying to write stories even if you don't feel that you can. It's as simple as saying, in the beginning, such and such happened. And just do it. Practice it. It's really great. Poetry is great as well. Poetry has mental effects because you're working on arranging words or you're working on rhyming. It doesn't matter if it's terrible. No one has to read it. The whole point is that you're keeping your thought processes fluid and you're seeing how words work. I should add here too that you can invent words. Inventing words is a great way to keep your mind flowing and have amazing sorts of things that happen. And one of the ways to invent words is to take a word like poetry and alphabetize the order of the letters in the word. So in this case it would be Eopry, and Eopry would be sort of irrity or something like that, irrity, and that would be a new word, right? We're just making it a word by changing the order of the letters. I know that sounds totally crazy, but it's a brain exercise. And if you go around looking at street signs and reordering the letters and coming up with new words, you're just accessing different parts of your brain, and it's really amazing. And it's kind of like writing without writing. Now, day journaling is a specific technique where you basically write down whatever's going on. In 59 Seconds, Richard Weissman talks with somebody in that book about how they journal and how that they feel that they've lived so much longer in their life since they journaled their stuff in the day than before. And one of the reasons why this happens is because you're paying so much more attention to each and every day, and you begin to see that you have much more time than you actually think. Night journaling, of course, is writing down your dreams, and I highly, highly recommend your dreams. For more information, you can just email me at howtorememberyourdreams.com, and I'll send you something about that. Now, writing correspondence is really great. I have a prison correspondent, and we have a great time writing back and forth, and that's handwriting. So it's accessing different parts of the brain. It's also accessing someone who is in a different part of the world who doesn't have access to internet. And it's very, very interesting to correspond to somebody who is basically going to enter a time machine upon release and see all these amazing things like iPhones, and it's just really interesting. So there's that, and then there's constraint writing. And constraint writing, which relates to poetry, is not just using Twitter, although Twitter is really interesting to try and squeeze a meaningful message into just so few characters. Constraint writing is also doing things like writing a sentence without using the letter E. And again, it's just another sort of brain exercise, but it's incredibly creative and it induces creativity. And so you should never have writer's block. If you ever feel like you don't know what to write, you either write your name over and over and over again, or you try to write a sentence with without the letter E or without the letter N, or pick a letter, or you rearrange the letters in a word and come up with new stuff. Just get engaged in writing so that you never actually have writer's block, because the fact of the matter is that there's really no such thing as writer's block. Writing is easy. You just write your name over and over again. You're writing something. It's a mechanical activity. But what you have is thinker's block. And so by engaging your body, getting your body into the act of writing, you are in essence overcoming thinker's block, because you're giving your thinking part of your mind something to do. And it's so boring in some cases that, especially when you write your name over and over again, that something else will come to mind to write about. So give that a try. The other thing that I said before already is that all wealth comes from writing. And it's really, really true when you think about it. Whether it's computer code to build software, which makes people incredibly wealthy, or just any kind of journaling, wealth comes from that, because you know yourself better. And really, going back to Socrates, the unexamined life may not be worth living. And so having an examined life is probably one of the greatest riches that you can experience. And yeah, writing is amazing. Being able to communicate effectively by email or by correspondence, written correspondence on a job application, a cover letter for a job, this is such a powerful skill, and really every dollar you ever will make in your life is either directly connected to writing or tangentially connected from it. And the more you can write, the more opportunities will open up for you. Now, you also want to know how to outline from index cards and write freely. So this again is a tip for you to go and check out on magneticmemorymethod.com, the podcast called How to Memorize a Textbook. You can go into that. It's a great free resource for you, and it will teach you about using index cards. In terms of writing freely, you also want to be able to just write off the top of your head and be able to come up with some kind of essay. And you can just practice that by giving yourself assignments. Give yourself an assignment like, why is the color red so interesting? Or what would history have been like if the Titanic hadn't sunk? Things like this. This is a really interesting sort of free essays that you can give yourself, and that's quite an interesting and wonderful exercise. Now, you want to also embrace all your thoughts of failure. A lot of people say put it out of your head, don't think about failing, and just focus on the positive and so on. Well, this is nonsense. When you're going to think about failure, no matter what you do, you're going to have negative thoughts. It's just going to come. And so the answer is to treat them like crying children and embrace them and take care of them and tell them that it's okay. This is not meant to be the feel-good part of this lecture, but you really, really, really don't want to try and force negative thoughts away. You just make them stronger. And that's not good. They're just going to get monstrous on you. So embrace them and treat them like you would treat a loved one who has bumped and hurt their knee, or whatever. Your girlfriend has banged her head and you hold her and you kiss her until the tears go away. That's exactly what you should do with all negative thoughts and all thoughts of failure. And if you are ever caught in procrastination and you're feeling really guilty, do something instead of doing nothing. I mentioned the Eckhart Tolle line before about if you're going to procrastinate, at least feel good about it and at least enjoy it instead of spending all that wonderful free time that you're not doing anything and fretting. Then if you're doing that, do something. I write here that one push-up is always the gateway drug to 10 push-ups. Well, it doesn't have to be push-ups. Go for a walk or play Nintendo. I don't know what you're doing, but do something instead of just sitting around doing nothing, because movement is usually better than meditation, which is something I heard from a guy named Joe Polish, who was quoting another guy. And, meditation is, without a doubt, really, really awesome, but movement when you're stuck is probably the best thing you can do. So we talked about writer's block before. If you have that, just get up and move. And, that's what I'm saying. Just write something, because that's movement. Write your name again and again and again. It's movement. You're utilizing movement to give your mind a portal that it can use to enter thought. And so always do something and do push-ups. They're great. You want to also, moving from negative thoughts and how to embrace them, you also want to expect that great things are going to happen every day. And truly, great things are happening every day. Even on your worst day, there are so many billions of people on the planet that somebody is doing something awesome, and you can just really think about that and try to join them rather than all the people that aren't doing something awesome. You don't have to go down that route. There's always amazing things happening all the time, and so be a part of that. You also want to achieve desired outcomes knowing that they are really more important than being right and winning arguments. So don't get bogged down, and it's something you find in the university all the time is people are trying to win arguments over which philosopher has it right and which social movement is the best and so on and so on. And the fact of the matter is that those arguments are never going to change the tides. There's no one who is ever going to be right, and all kinds of things. It doesn't even have just to do with universities, labor parties, workplaces. People are fretting and finicking over the most inconsequential things you can imagine. And being right really doesn't matter at the end of the day. What matters is that you get your desired outcome. And if your desired outcome is in line with your real, true, honest desires for life, what you really want to be doing, then being right will never really matter. It's just doing what you really, truly want to do that will count. Avoid negative people at all costs. And that doesn't mean push them away or stomp on them or anything like that, because that in itself would be negative. But just negative thinking really will not help. It really is draining. And so that's part of the point of the last time, is that getting your outcome is more important than winning. And there's something negative about competition. Competition is great in the right context, but a lot of the arguments that go on are competitive for the wrong reasons, and there's negativity to it. So just stay out of that stuff as much as you can, if not completely. And finally, I would just conclude with the idea that you should, as much as possible, be kind to other people. There's nothing so important in the world that requires being snippety or impatient with other people. It just doesn't make sense, and it's totally unnecessary. We live here together on planet Earth, and if someone bumps in front of you in the line at the cafeteria on your campus, who cares? It's 20 seconds of your time, or 2 minutes, or 12 minutes that you're going to be delayed. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't make a difference over the whole course of your life to lose this, but or in traffic or whatever the case may be. The whole issue really is that life is great, and nothing is really of great consequence that it's worth being angry with other people or anything like this. Just see other people as children on the earth doing the best they can in the circumstances that they're in, and obviously don't accept being harmed by others, but just be kind. And I'm sure that if you keep that in mind, you will find that your life goes much simpler as a student and beyond. So let's see, what would be the alphabetical order of be kind? B, E, D, nay, B, D, E, H, I, J, K. See, this is a great exercise. You figure it out and figure out what would be a new word for be kind. And we'll talk to you soon. I hope you enjoyed this. The full training, Memory Secrets of an A+ Student, that goes into the memory techniques in great, great detail is on howtobecomeaprofessor.com/Anthony. And that was me, Anthony Metivier, signing off. I hope you enjoyed and talk to you soon. Bye bye.